Welcome, mates. Today I'm featuring 3 more Slimline cards I made with the My Monthly Hero Arts kit for April 2020. I love making these stately cards. Let's get started creating. Card number 3, I started with an 80-pound Nina White cardstock panel, and I created a rainbow colored panel using Distress Oxide inks. I love the beautiful rainbow these Distress Oxide inks create. They blend wonderfully. You'll see here that I placed my panel inside my Misty and centered my stamp sentiment. And then I'm going to do some repeat stamps. I'm using the Hero Arts Intense Black ink from the kit. I started at the top and I moved my cardstock down every 3/4 of an inch and stamped. I repeated the stamping until I reached the end of the panel. Next, I cut 3 different colored balloons to make a balloon bouquet. I used the Sunny Studio balloon die. Off screen, I cut a piece of 40-pound basil vellum to 4 1/4 inches wide by 8 1/2 tall. Then I scored the vellum on the left side at a 1/2 inch and folded and creased it using my bone folder. Now I'm placing it on my cardstock. I placed my cardstock inside of the vellum face up, glued the back flap of the vellum to the back side of the panel. Then I placed glue underneath. I also cut a kangaroo using dies from the kit out of black cardstock. I added twine to the balloons to form the bouquet strings. Put a little tacky glue on the die cut kangaroo and fashioned the strings so that it appears that the kangaroo is holding the bouquet. I placed the kangaroo on the cardstock and placed an acrylic block over it to let it dry a bit. Then I trimmed the ends of the balloon bouquet strings. I added the card panel to a 7 1/2 by 8 1/2 side folded card base. And here's the finished card. Now on to card number 4. This card features the background stencil from the kit. I used the bottom half to make ocean water and waves, and I used the Salty Ocean Distress Oxide ink and a blending brush to make the ocean. I used the My Favorite Things mini cloud stencil along with tumbled glass Distress Oxide ink to create the clouds. Using the Hero Arts Intense Black ink from the current kit, I stamped mountains from a previous Hero Arts kit. anti-static powder to my panel, used VersaFine Onyx Black Pigment ink to stamp my sentiment, and clear embossing powder to heat emboss the sentiment. Good day, mate. From a Hero Arts mountain layering kit, I die cut the smaller mountain out of black cardstock. I also stamped the birds in intense black ink. Those birds came from another previous Hero Arts. Here I'm planning the placement of the sharks that I die cut from the kit, the great white shark and the wreath shark. So once I find my placement, I'm going to go ahead and affix them to the panel with craft tacky glue. I turned my panel over and trimmed the edges and added the panel to a black 110-pound card base that was 7.5 by 8.5 side folded. And my original panel was 3.5 by 8.25, so as to leave a black border around the card. Now here's a look at cards number 3 and 4. Now let's move on to card number 5. I think this one's my favorite. This one features the Hero Arts Tropical Foliage Bold Prints background. I started with a black slimline panel. I stamped the background using Hero Arts white pigment ink and set it aside to dry. Using a scrapbook.com die set, I die cut 3 progressive size squares from the panel and from 80-pound Neenah white cardstock. I used 3 dies that were, one was a 1.5 inch, 2 inch, and then 2.5 inches. I taped the 3 dies together to form my design. After die cutting, I used the 80-pound Neenah white cardstock and the stencil from the kit to color a small piece of the sky and the sun from the stencil. I used Dusty Concord and Fossilized Amber Distress Oxide inks to blend a small portion of the sky. After the ink dried, I heat embossed the sentiment Butte on the square with VersaFine Black Onyx ink. I moved to the middle square and blended the Dusty Concord and Fossilized Amber to form more sky. Using the Hero Arts Intense Black ink from the kit and a branch stamp from another Hero Arts kit, I stamped the branch of leaves and the cockatoo. Moving to the last larger square, I used Mowed Lawn Distress ink to stamp the palm tree from the kit. Then I used the Dusty Concord and blended with Chipped Sapphire to continue the skyline. Using Vintage Photo Distress Oxide ink, I colored the ground brown. Then I used the Intense Black ink and I stamped the dingo 4 times on top of the Distress Oxide inks. Using craft tacky glue, I glued the black die cut squares behind the colored and stamped squares and trimmed them about 1/8 of an inch on either side. And then I used the craft tacky glue to affix the black panel to a black 110-pound 7.5 by 8.5 side folding card base. To add interest, I used a white Uniball Signal gel pen and my T-square ruler and added white stitching around each square. I added a dot in each corner. And then I moved on to my sentiments and heat embossed those on black cardstock scraps using Versamark embossing ink and white embossing powder. The finished card measures 3.25 by 8.5. And if you missed my DIY Slimline Card Envelope tutorial, I will link that below. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'll be back soon with more inspiration. Leave your questions, comments, and some love below. Until next time, good day, mates.